What's up, everybody? Today, we're going to have a look at El Conditional Perfecto, or the Conditional Perfect, which is another one of our perfect tenses. And so this one generally comes after the future perfect in terms of teaching, but in much of the same way, I combine the future perfect with the future tense just to show how they worked with one another. I'm going to do that with the conditional perfect. In other words, I'm going to show you how to use the conditional perfect as a perfect tense, but I'm also going to, as you can see over here, remind you of how the conditional tense works. And so they're going to work in different ways, but as we move through a lot of this stuff, particularly the perfect tenses, putting aside the subjunctive ones, of course, but the conditional perfect, the future perfect, things like that, what you're going to find is in much of the same way you would use it in English for English speakers, it's going to be used, it's a really nice cozy translation into Spanish. And so hopefully by the end of this and by watching some of the other videos, you'll see what I'm talking about when I talk about this nice sort of cozy translation in terms of when it's used, right? And so I guess to sort of in sum, before we get started, what I mean by that is with the conditional perfect, for example, if you were to say, you would have gone to the beach, but it was raining, it's going to be a nice, easy translation. It's going to fit really well. And I'm going to show you what I mean once we talk about what the conditional perfect is. And then, so like I said, we'll talk about what it is. We'll look at some translations. And of course, as I said, I've essentially put the very same translation, or we're going to do a very similar translation from what we have here. In other words, this over here is going to be the conditional perfect translations. And then you're going to see over here what I'm calling the simple conditional. And so we're going to look at those translations as well and how they differ in terms of how they're used in Spanish. And so let's go ahead and get started. Like all perfect tenses, as you guys very well know at this point, it's going to use haber and haber as the helping verb and a past participle. And again, the past participles, we continue to nickname them ado and ido. Of course, as you know, there are some irregular ones, but that's just the nickname we've been giving it, right? And so the ARs will end with ado, the IRs and the ERs will end with ido, right? And so we'll have a look at that, of course, when we do some of our translations, and just to re-emphasize or reiterate that. But again, as far as the conjugations are concerned, it's essentially the conditional conjugation of the verb haber, right? And in much of the same way you saw with the future perfect, haber was an irregular, right? In terms of its future tense, future conjugation, it's going to be the same exact irregular for the conditional tense. And so it's going to be, as you can see here, the HABR, that very same HABR with the future, right? And so like, for example, I will have was habré, right? Habré. And so you're going to keep that very same HABR, except for the conditional tense, of course, you're going to put different endings on it. And so these are, as you can see here, these are the endings for the conditional conjugation of the verb haber, which, of course, as you know, for all perfect tenses, is its helping verb or auxiliary verb. And so, again, for the conditional perfect, it is haber in the conditional tense paired with a past participle. That, when you do that, is the conditional perfect. And so let's have a look at how these are pronounced. So we have habría, habrías, habría, habríamos, habríais, habrían, right? And so I'm going to do that again so you all that are watching can repeat this with me and practice. And so here we go. I'll put a pause in between every one so you can repeat after me. Habría, habrías, habría, habríamos, habríais, habrían. Right, I'll do that one more time. Habría, habrías, habría, habríamos, habríais, habrían. Right? And of course, if you need to pause and practice that or rewind, feel free to do that, of course. And so, as I said, you're going to use the conditional tense with haber, and then of course, again, just to sort of reiterate, you're going to use a past participle. That's going to create the conditional perfect. Now, the question is, what are you saying, right? And so I wrote that up here, would have, right? If you need to refresh the future perfect, of course, go watch that video. But notice that with the future perfect, it was will have and then your past participle. Just like the future tense is will, I will eat, for example, as opposed to I will have eaten, right? That would be the use of the future and then the future perfect. The conditional perfect, again, is not will, but would. It's conditioned upon something. And so the conditional perfect is I would have, you would have, he, she, it would have, we would have, you all would have, right? Vosotros. And then they all would have. And of course, you would pair that with a past participle. And we'll look at that when we do these examples. And so, but again, I just wanted to stress that the conditional perfect is would have. Just like the conditional, or the simple conditional is what I'm calling it, is just would. And so I would eat as opposed to I would have eaten. That's the difference right there. And so, and again, of course, just to, as a bit of a refresher, a reminder, and as always, if you need to review the conditional, check out that video. But again, here are your endings, just sort of as a case in point, right? Because we're really just applying these endings to haber. That's what we're doing, right? And so, ia, ias, ia, iamos, iais, ia. Again, those are the conditional endings. And so, like I said, for all intents and purposes, we are taking those endings and applying them to haber. It just so happens that haber is an irregular verb, right? Because the standard structure for the conditional, as well as the future, right, is infinitive, unconjugated verb, and then you attach, in the case of the conditional, you attach these endings to it, right? And so, let me just give you an example, since we were using comer, right, to eat. So comeré, or comería, sorry. Yo comería, I would eat, right? And so I would eat shellfish, but I'm allergic to them, right? And so it's always conditioned upon something. And so in terms of the simple conditional itself, right, it is the infinitive plus the ending. Right? And so, but again, like I said, we're going to work with that when we get to these translations, and it'll paint a bit more of a clearer picture of what the conditional perfect is and how it's used, and what the conditional or simple conditional is and how it's used. And so I want to just jump right on into that, and we're just going to translate these sentences. As always, if you want to hit pause and try them on your own, by all means, please do so. And then you can hop right back in, hit play, and we'll all do it together. And of course, as always, you can look in the description box for more help and more practice. And so be sure to do that if obviously you're super stoked on this and you want to practice more. So yeah, so let's have a look at these ejemplos that I have written here. You would have gone to the beach, but it was raining. You would have gone to the beach, but it was raining. And now check this out, because I put its, essentially its counterpart right here under the conditional. So that's going to be a way for you to see how the conditional perfect is used and how the conditional is used, right? And so I have here, you would go to the beach, but it's raining. Right now, I want to note one thing before we really get into the translations themselves. Notice that I have you would have gone to the beach. You would have gone, right? The going to the beach is sort of come and gone, so to speak. So notice what we say here. You would have gone to the beach, but it was raining, right? And so notice you're pairing the conditional perfect with a past tense, right? And this is really the past progressive, if you will, right? It was raining. Estaba lloviendo. And we'll get to that in a second. But notice the difference here when we use the simple conditional. We'd say, you would go to the beach, but it's raining. So instead of saying you would have gone, but it was raining, you're saying you would go, but it's raining, right? And so it's more of a present tense sort of deal, right? This is in its present tense, whereas this is being used in a past tense. And so hopefully that makes sense. And we'll, like I said, we'll walk through these. And that's sort of why I wanted to put these beside one another, so that you could see how they work in Spanish and in these sentences, right? And in real life, I guess you might even say. So let's have a look at this. You would have gone to the beach, but it was raining. I'm gonna stick with the purple. So, tú habrías ido, right? You would have, right? Would have, you would have. So we got tú habrías ido to the beach, a la playa, right? To the beach, but it was raining. So we'll put a comma here, and pero estaba lloviendo, right? That's the past progressive, right? Using estad with a gerund. And so that's saying it was raining. So, tú habrías ido a la playa, pero estaba lloviendo, right? Perfect. So you would have gone, but it was raining. So notice how all that's sort of playing around in the past. Number two, número dos, I would have bought a truck, but my friend wanted a car. Again, notice that it's the purchase is probably, in this case, come and gone, right? The car seemingly has been bought. So let's look at its counterpart over here, actually. I would buy a truck, right? So we're still sort of in the present, if you will, but my friend wants a car. So notice what you're doing there, right? And so let's work on this translation. And again, as I said, we'll go over there afterwards. I would have bought a truck. So I would have, yo habría, right? Again, we're working from this list here, yo habría, whereas the previous one was tú habrías. I would have bought a car, yo habría, or a truck, sorry. To buy is comprar, so it's yo habría comprado. Yo habría comprado, I would have bought a truck. So we're gonna go with una camioneta, and I know there's other ways of saying truck, but we're just gonna go with that one. So yo habría comprado una camioneta, pero, right? So we're gonna come back over here, pero, but my friend, mi amigo, right? Mi amigo wanted a car. And so when we want to say wanted in the past, we're going to use querer, of course, because that means to want, but we're going to use it in the imperfect tense, because generally when you want to say wanted in the past, you're going to use querer in the imperfect tense, because, you know, it's one of those verbs that changes meaning if you put it in the preterite. So grammatically, right? So I'm speaking grammatically here, grammatically speaking. And so when you say quise, for example, it means I tried, right? And again, that's by the grammar book. And I know it's colloquially used in other ways, but again, just to stick, you know, to the grammar, I'm gonna abide by the rules, let's say. And so, yo habría comprado una camioneta, pero mi amigo quería un carro, right? And again, I know there's other ways of saying car. You have auto, you have coche, there's other ways, of course. But I'm opting for carro for this example. And so, again, I wanted to just briefly explain that for those of you who are, you know, maybe you use something different. So I just wanted you to know why I was using the imperfect tense right here. And so, yo habría comprado una camioneta, pero mi amigo quería un carro. Perfect, right? And let's have a look at the last one. We would have studied last night, but we went to a party, right? And then let's come over here. I've tweaked this one slightly. We would study, but there's a party tonight, right? And I'm sure you can understand why I had to, you know, retool that a little bit. But I tried to stay with the same idea, same concept. So let's have a look here. We would have studied last night. Nosotros, right? And for those of you saying, well, do I need nosotros? Do I need yo? Do I need tú? Not necessarily, right? But I'm writing it just for fun. Right? Nosotros habríamos, let's try to spell that right. Nosotros habríamos, that's an A, by the way. Nosotros habríamos estudiado, right? Nosotros habríamos estudiado, we would have studied, but, right? Seems like there's as you can see this pattern here, we would have done something but, right? It's conditioned upon something. And so, nosotros habríamos estudiado, pero We went to a party. Fuimos a una fiesta. Right? And for those of you who went ahead of us, hopefully your answers look similar to this. So again, just to reiterate, we would have studied last night. Whoops, I forgot to put last night. Right? I know whoever went ahead of us is probably like, whoa, what about last night? So there you go. My bad. Nosotros habríamos estudiado anoche, last night, pero fuimos a una fiesta, but we went to a party, right? And so that's great. And what I want to do now is I want to go over and look at its counterpart in the simple conditional. And so you can see sort of how they both work differently and uniquely in the language. So we're going to use green for that. And we're going to go back here to number 1. And again, just to remind you, you would have gone to the beach, but it was raining. Now let's see what it looks like with the simple conditional. You would go to the beach, but it's raining. And so instead of using the past progressive like we used here, estaba lloviendo, we're going to use the present progressive, which is está lloviendo. So again, let's check this out. So you would go to the beach. Tú irías a la playa, right? Tú irías a la playa, right? That's ir in the conditional tense, ir, and then you add our ending there. So tú irías a la playa, pero está lloviendo. There you go. So you're using the conditional in this case with the present progressive as opposed to using the conditional perfect with the past progressive. And so again, take note of what we're saying here. You would go to the beach, but it's raining. Like you're packing your bags and you'd be super stoked to go to the beach, but you can't go because it's raining. And so again, take note of that. Let's move on to number 2. We have, I would buy a truck, but my friend, we'll put a comma there, but my friend wants a car. Now that's different, slightly different, right? From our example number 2 here. I would have bought a truck, but my friend wanted a car. And again, notice that it's conditional perfect in a past tense, right? In this case, it's gonna be the conditional with present tense, right? And so I would buy a truck. So we have comprar, right? We've established that comprar is to buy. So I would buy, compraría una camioneta, right? Pero my friend wants a car. Pero mi amigo, right? Instead of saying quería, which is the imperfect, which we have here in the past, we're just going to say wants, quiere, right? Mi amigo quiere un carro. There you go. So instead of it being a past event, it's now more of a conditioned on something kind of more or less in the present, right? And so compraría una camioneta, and of course, if you want to put yo, you can, you're more than welcome to. Yo compraría una camioneta, pero mi amigo quiere un carro. There you go, right? And let's finish off with number 3 here. We would study, but there's a party tonight, right? And so let's look at that as compared to number 3 over here. We would have studied last night, but we went to a party. Now, of course, I know that's slightly different, but this allows me in this example to use the conditional and of course, something conditioned upon it, right? And so let's have a look. So we would study. We know that estudiar is to study, so we would study. So estudiaríamos, we would study, right? Oops, that's not an I. So we would study, and of course you can write nosotros. Nosotros estudiaríamos, that's all good. Estudiaríamos, pero I, right? I is there is or there are, right? And that's what that means. So estudiaríamos, pero hay una fiesta esta noche, right? Esta noche. Estudiaríamos, pero hay una fiesta esta noche. We would study, but there's a party tonight. And so we're not going to study and we're going to go to the party, right? And so that, in a sense, is the conditional, and again, the present tense here, as compared to sort of reflecting the day after and saying, we would have studied, or we would have studied last night, but we went to a party. And so hopefully you can see the difference in these examples. But again, I just want to reiterate the conditional perfect being would have, right? That's what, when we use the conditional perfect, we're talking about would have, and then our past participle. We would have studied, right? You would have gone, right? For example, or I would have bought. That's your conditional perfect. And so I hope this video was helpful. And as I said earlier, if you need more help, check out what's going on in the description box. We've got some how-tos, we've got some activities there, and hopefully that'll help you out as well. And so thanks for watching. Buena suerte y adios.